formally, but I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Kat, and I'm going to be hosting this. I'm a member of Team Bridget. This is our first webinar, so we'd like to thank everybody that's actually signed on and come through. So on this first webinar, we are joined by Mark Spikings, who's a CBT therapist with over 10 years experience. So he's going to give you some insights on how you can actually manage the difficulties of being a carer and caring for yourselves. So first things we've mentioned before, there is a chat function at the bottom of the actual screen where you can actually have a chat, put any questions to us. Preferentially, we'd like to use the Q&A. So when you have any questions as Mark goes through, we can actually bookmark them and then we can come back to them at the end and Mark can go through them with you as well. So let's just give other people 5 minutes to come in and then we'll start with Mark.
Just got a few more answers. I've got some practical tips on self-care to also share with others. That's great because ultimately we want to help as many people as we can. So that's fantastic. Been looking a lot around resilience and interested in applying more ideas to myself as a carer. You're definitely in the right place. That's really interesting. I have no expectations. I'm joining from 2 points of views. Wow, that's really cool. So kind of being involved with mental health and well-being at work is definitely useful for this, wouldn't you say, Kat?
Yeah, definitely so. It's great to have people with different backgrounds on this, how they can actually do their own professional practice as well as in their own personal lives as well.
Yeah, for sure, because ultimately carers are sort of everyone really, aren't they? There's
exactly.
No
it's not but I think a lot of the times people are kind of, when you say you're caring for somebody, they assume you're a paid carer. And not that, and a lot of people don't identify as being carers. I don't know if anyone in the group feels that.
Hello, Jonas and Kevin who have just joined, and Angela. Hiya, Dimmy. Social care outside school hours. Again, definitely, it's nice. Everyone's in the right place.
Yes.
Perfect. We're all on the same page. So we'll give it a little bit longer because we're still having people join.
Yeah. I mean, we do have a little thank you at the end of this webinar as well. So when we do finish, don't just rush off. We're gonna give you a little something as well.
Exactly. Hang on till the end. I'm sure that won't be a problem.
Not at all, because Mark's got some great stuff in there to
exactly. And yeah, so someone in the chat saying we feel we do not always get the recognition or understanding, and it's not a choice. No, it's true. Often it really isn't a choice. And I think, well, we were saying recently how overlooked unpaid carers are as kind of a demographic of people, weren't we, Kat?
In fact, could we just do one more test? Can everybody see the Q&A icon at the bottom? Could each and every one of you just put in there just a comment, just click the button and just put a comment in there so we know that you can actually, that it's working correctly for you all.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Angela. Dimi, Catherine.
Thank you, Debbie. Oh, thank you, everybody. Okay, cool. So if you have any questions, pop them in there and we will answer them at the end. That's the thought, isn't it, Kat? We'll answer them all at the end.
Yeah.
If there are any really pressing ones, I'm sure we can deal with them when they come in.
Hi, Emma.
Pretty widespread where we are.
Okay, so we're on 5 past. Do you think that's enough time for everybody to be going through, or should we give them a little bit more time?
Well, we can make a start. Sweden, wow.
Yeah, fantastic.
We can make a start, and I will welcome any late attendees.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Take it away.
Okay, so welcome everybody, and thanks for attending our first webinar for Bridget Care. My name's Kat. I'm actually going to be introducing our first speaker, the first webinar, who is Mark Spikings, a CBT therapist with over 10 years experience. What I'd also like to let those that don't know, there is actually a chat function in the website on the Zoom. So if you have any questions, if you use the Q&A button, you can then ask questions. Mark is going to ask you to interact within this webinar as well. So at times he will ask you to put your comments in the chat function. So just click that at the bottom and pose your answers. So without further ado, I'm going to pass you on to Mark Spikings.
Good afternoon, everyone. So what we're going to be talking about today is managing the difficulties of being a carer and caring for ourselves. So how I've sort of separated today's talk out is I've separated it out into a couple of areas. The first sort of area is talking a little bit about why do we find it sort of, or why do we feel like it's so difficult at times. Then from there, we're going to sort of have a discussion about the carer cycle. Then from there, we're going to make some small steps to see actually, can we change what we do? Can we step back from difficult types of thoughts or tricky thoughts? And from that point, we'll then look at ways of sort of managing the more tricky feelings or physical tensions. So that might be emotions that we feel quite overwhelming or powerful at times, or maybe just sort of just feeling so physically overwhelmed that we just don't know what to do. So those are some of the sort of starting points that we're going to be looking at for today. If at any point that the content or anything that we talk about today, it gets a little bit too much or too overwhelming, feel more than free at any point to sort of speak to the Bridget Care team. Okay. So why does it sort of feel so difficult? Why is at times it can feel like it's a struggle? One thing we've got to remember within all this is that actually we are human. And part and parcel of being human, we're pre-programmed to recognise more negative experience than we are positive experiences. We're pre-programmed to sort of recognise more anxious feelings, more negative thoughts than we are the sort of the positive experiences, positive emotions, or anything else that we feel quite helpful. The reason why this is, it's something that's been evolutionarily primed and drilled into us. It's a survival mechanism. It's something that's kept us where we need to be within the species and the food chain. It's something that's kept us safe and well. But unfortunately, when we're spinning lots of different plates, this sort of evolutionary strategy sort of serves to sort of do us harm. It does, and it serves to keep us feeling more stressed. So if you consider ourselves as being people being carers, we're often on a sort of a tightrope, juggling sort of family life, maybe a job, maybe our own health, or maybe other types of things at the same time. And it's that sort of permanent tightrope that we're trying to sort of to juggle. And whilst we just sort of juggle in this, we might be noticing the negative experiences associated with each of these struggles. And amongst that, our focus gets drawn into these sort of negative experiences. And when the focus gets drawn into these areas, our mind and emotional entanglement almost becomes focused onto this. And it only makes sense that actually, as humans, we start to feel that we're sort of struggling or start to feel that things become a little bit more difficult or tricky. And actually, that's okay. This is what the body was sort of primed to do. This isn't our faults that we're feeling this way. This is like response to the sort of situations that we're in. And sometimes in the response to situations that we're in, as part and parcel of being human, when we experience certain types of emotions, we do what we're trying to do to resolve this sort of emotion. So, say for example, we might put off doing things for ourselves, and the reason why we may do that is like the strong feeling of guilt. And when we put off doing these types of things for ourselves, that guilt sort of fades. But then when we sort of need to do something again for ourselves, that feeling of guilt then sort of really rears its ugly head, and we feel overwhelmed or incapacitated by it again. So it can feel like sort of like a real struggle, or that we're walking through treacle at times. Okay. So there's the sort of cycle that we sometimes people can get stuck into. Like it's a cycle of different types of emotions that interlink with one another. Some people may notice feelings of frustration at times, where they may notice and say to themselves, actually, this is my life now. I can't cope. Things won't get better. They might notice that sort of sensations of irritability, sleeping difficulties, not being able to concentrate or feeling tense. They might sort of self-neglect themselves. They might avoid going out. They might avoid trying to socialise. As a consequence of that, these types of areas then impact upon each other. And the cycle sort of gets more of a vicious cycle, and that each area impacts one another. Just for thinking for a moment, just thinking of an example, if we just using a general case study. So say, for example, we just use the name Jackie. Jackie is a 55-year-old lady, and she's looking after her mum who's got dementia. Jackie's got sort of two of her sisters, but Jackie's also got long-term health issues. She has herself. She's got cardiovascular disease, and she also works, and has got two grandchildren. And what Jackie's finding is that she's finding as her mum's conditions worsens, she's trying to sort of spend more trying to do different types of things for her mum. And as she does this, what Jackie notices is that actually she's doing less things for herself. She notices that times that she puts off asking her sisters for help, or asking other professionals for help, because there's this sort of perception of actually she should be able to cope with this. She should be able to deal with this. I should be better than this. Or and what she then also tries to do is she tries to sort of almost avoid asking for help, or declines help. And more, as more and more of Jackie's time gets taken over, it does. And she finds that she's living in her head more. She finds that she's not able to concentrate. Finds that on the night, she finds herself thinking about what she's going to be doing the next day. And when she wakes up on the morning, she almost feels like a car that's trying to rev, trying to turn over. And she finds it struggle to trying to get herself going again. And what she's finding is that as time goes on, she's doing less and less for herself, avoiding the life, and she just gets stuck into this sort of increasing cycle. What time she's feeling frustrated, anxious, and guilty for how she's feeling. Now the tricky part is breaking this type of cycle. So there's an old sort of saying, and for many people who've sort of travelled on a plane before would be aware of this, is that one of the sort of first sort of points of when we go onto a plane, we're given that sort of sense of advice to put on your own oxygen mask if you need to do it before anyone else's. Now, why is it that we're told that? Well, the reason why we are told that is that in an event of emergency, or if anything happens, that actually we need to look after the care of ourselves before we look after the care of the people around us. That if we didn't put our own oxygen masks on, then we risk not being able to put the persons that we're caring for mask on at the same time. And then that's two people that were experiencing further difficulty. So in order to look after the people that are around us, we also need to look after ourselves. Okay, so one of the first things I tend to sort of look at with this is trying to sort of look at ways of breaking out the sort of patterns that we might be in. So I tend to start off with by sort of talking a little bit about where we can, scheduling time for ourselves. So that might be sort of a time to sort of see a friend, go for coffee, to engage in sort of types of things that really once mattered for yourself. It might be sort of allowing sort of that time to read a book or do the other types of things. So that if maybe other types of barriers that may get in the way of that, but what so that might be the sense of actually, if I was to do these types of things for myself, then uh, then I feel guilty or responsible for not doing the other types of things. But what many people do find is that actually initially, if they sort of just do these types of things for themselves initially, that over time that feeling of guilt becomes less, and actually it becomes a little bit easier to start doing things for themselves. Although it's still a struggle, it becomes a little bit easier over time by allowing that time, day in or a couple of times a week, where allowing times for themselves, that feeling of guilt becomes less and less. Sometimes with when we're caring for a loved one that we're particularly close to, so it might be a partner, it might be a close family member, we might have engaged in activities together with them. And what might be important to do with that is it might be important to sort of think about what types of activities did we once value and enjoy doing together. So an example for that might be a couple once enjoyed dancing together, and used to once enjoyed going out, listening to music and dancing together, and spending that time. And although that because of COVID or other sort of health situations, may not be able to do this in this, they might be able to still do some elements of that together. So they might be able to listen to the music together. They may be able to sort of still allow that sort of time where they spend some time each day as a carer or caree or husband and wife, where they're allowing that time to spend time listening to the music together, or even allowing that spend time where they're allowing time to sort of dance together, even if it's a sort of for a short period of time. Even if a person can't get up to sort of dance, they might be able to sort of dance to some sort of way, shape, or form, and just by sat next to each other. The other one I want us to sort of consider that may make it easier to do these types of things is it may be sort of trying to share responsibilities with other people. When I say sharing responsibilities, that might be like sharing responsibilities with some family members. That might be with other people that are close. That might be sharing responsibilities or asking other people for help at times. But often what many carers sort of tend to notice is types of thoughts will tend to get in the way for this, is that sense of actually, I should be doing this. What would happen if I didn't do this? How would my loved one respond if someone else did this? But we'll talk about in a moment how we can sort of step back from those types of thoughts in a sort of second. The second part of ways that we can sort of enable ourselves to have that time for ourselves is being more assertive in certain types of situations, or saying no, or saying to someone else, actually, I need you to do this. So that might be a situation at work, for example, where work are asking other people to take on more hours or take on more responsibility. And as a consequence of doing that, more time's taken away from doing things that they may have once loved or they may have once enjoyed. And as a consequence of that, they get stuck into that sort of deeper quagmire of where the mood becomes more tricky and things become more difficult. So here to start off with, here's a sort of some of the small steps to start to break ourselves up with. When we're talking about breaking the cycle by changing behavioural sort of steps, we're not looking at doing sort of massive things, but we might be doing something small. Starting off with just allowing ourselves to take 5 minutes for ourselves one week, maybe 10, then building up to 10 the next, maybe 15 the week after that, and then just allowing ourselves to build up. And when we allow that time for ourselves, not to using that time to do other types of things. When I say other types of things, what many carers fall into trap of is that when they do have that time for themselves, is to use the time to do jobs or chores. That might be the cooking, the cleaning, the ironing, and trying to squeeze all that in the time where they're meant to be sort of almost looking after themselves. So what I want us to sort of consider is the types of things that can make it really tricky with this is the types of thoughts that we may have. And often the types of thoughts that we may have we can often become quite fused or stuck with difficult or tricky thoughts. When we have difficult thoughts or feelings, we often think we have to obey them. We might even argue with them. We might even try to push them away. But sometimes though, if we let them be or make space for them or make room, and we focus on what actions matter to ourselves, these types of thoughts will pass in their own time. And that's what we're going to be sort of looking at now, is we're going to be looking at ways of allowing ourselves to sort of notice these types of thoughts, allow them to sort of be them there and see if they can sort of allow them to pass and step back a little bit from them. And to allow these types of thoughts to lose a sense of power. What I want us to do for the people who are comfortable to do this, I want us to see if we can identify one or two thoughts that we may have found difficult or tricky over last week. So that might be an example of thought of I don't deserve to do something for myself, or it might be I don't feel good enough, or I never get anything right. And or for example, for myself today, is that sense of thought I'm going to make a complete hash of doing the presentation today. I'm going to get things wrong. But I just want us to start off by recognising just one thought. I'm going to that we found particular types of particularly tricky. And we're going to try a range of different techniques today and just see what happens from doing some of them. Okay. So like the first sort of technique I want us to sort of have a look at, which is a small technique that enables ourselves just to step back and just recognise that we're thinking. I just want us to practice saying the thought out loud. In the sense of, I'm having the thought of X, Y, and Z, and just to sort of notice what happens when I say that. So for the example for me, I'm having the thought of, I'm going to make a hash of today's presentation. Okay. And what I just want to invite some people to do is, if they feel comfortable to be able to do that, is I just want to sort of invite people to sort of notice what happens when they do that. And if they have been able to do that within the presentation today, it's just to sort of notice what happens, and if they feel comfortable, just to write down the chat box what happened when they did that. And I'll just give people sort of a moment to do that. Okay. Well, what we're going to do, that's okay if no one wants to. Oh, I think someone's going to give it a go. Yeah, that's interesting. So it starts to lose a bit of the power. Good. Good. So I can see some people that saying that it starts to lose a bit of the power. It doesn't seem as bad or dramatic. So we're going to sort of try a slightly different sort of technique, which uses a similar type of strategy here. Okay. So what I want us to do now is I want us to pick a tone of voice, or it could be an accent. It could be a famous person's voice. It could be Donald Trump. It could be Donald Duck. It could be your favourite cartoon character. It could be Vera Duckworth if you ever watched Coronation Street. But it could be absolutely anyone. And what I want us to do is I want us to sort of say that anxious thought, that tricky thought, in that tone of voice or the accent that ever you picked out. So say, for example, for myself, it was that thought of I'm going to make a hash of this. And I'm going to do it in the voice of Donald Duck. I'm going to make a hash of this. That's probably not the best Donald Duck impression, but I think we get the idea. I can see Kat just laughing in the corner of my box, but and again, I'll just allow other people to sort of just to give a quick go of that. And again, what if people are willing to give that a go? What do we notice from that? Okay. And I'll just give that sort of some people a moment just to sort of notice that. Okay, good. So I can. Good. I can see someone sort of saying that it introduces a sense of ridiculousness and it helps to sort of minimize. And that's kind of like what we're looking at here. Good. So good. So what we're looking at here is just to enable ourselves to step back, to enable ourselves to sort of move away from that type of thought for just a moment, to enable ourselves to do some of the things that matter, to enable to ourselves to do some of the things and connect to the types of things that were important to ourselves. So kind of like what we talked about in the last slide. We might find that we've got the skills to be assertive, but we might find that there's certain thoughts that get in the way for ourselves doing that. Okay. We're just going to go on to do the last sort of technique, okay, so, which is quite similar to the other ones, but this time what I want us to do now is we can use the same thought, or we might want to use a different thought. But what I'm going to encourage ourselves to do with this time is I want us to pick a song that you're familiar with. It could be a child's nursery rhyme. It could be your grandchild's favourite TV show. It could be the theme tune to Indiana Jones. It could be anything, any song that you're really familiar to the beat of. And what I want you to do is I'm going to ask you to sort of sing that anxious thought to the theme of that song. Okay. So for me, I'm going to sort of sing very badly. I'm not the best singer. To In the Night Garden, because that's what my little boy watches a lot of at the moment. I'm going to make a hash of this to the word of to the theme of In the Night Garden. I'm going to make a hash of this. 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 Okay. And what I'm just going to, again, just sort of, thanks, Kat, for the round of applause there. What I'm going to sort of do now is I'm just going to sort of ask or invite some people to just see what they notice when they do this. Okay, so has anyone else willing to sort of share their experience when they're giving that one a go? Okay. Good. I see some sort of saying. Good. So I can see some sort of saying it sort of shrinks it away, so it makes it sort of smaller. And I see with the last example, someone sort of saying it sounds like someone else is saying it. So, and again, the idea about these sort of techniques is to sort of enable ourselves to step back, enable to sort of make some of these types of feelings a little bit more manageable at times. But what I'm understand is that sometimes the first two methods that we talked about, sort of changing what we do, trying to sort of step back from thinking, isn't always possible. And what we might notice that we may get so caught up with the physical sensations, what we may be experiencing, that it's just too difficult to sort of be able to do that, or it may be just too hard to be able to do that. So what the idea here is to be able to sort of allow ourselves to sort of notice and step back from those sort of physical sensations that we may be having, and sort of maybe to sort of move away from some of those types of physical feelings for just a moment. It is. Okay. So what I'm going to sort of invite ourselves to do here with this sort of side of it is I want to sort of invite ourselves to sort of do sort of a quick exercise here. Okay, so what this exercise is about sort of allowing ourselves to step back from the sort of feelings of physical sensations or the tension that we may have. And what we're going to do with this this type of feeling is I just want us just to notice the breath going into the body when we do this exercise and the breath going out of the body. And I'm just going to sort of, what I'm going to ask everyone to do is, if everyone's willing to give this a go, so I'm going to ask everyone to sort of slowly breathe in, and I'm going to ask them to sort of slowly breathe out. And I'm going to sort of talk you through doing the exercise, if that's okay. So when if we're all ready and we're going to go with this, what I'm going to ask everyone to do, if you're in a comfortable position, sat upright, I'm going to ask everyone to just slowly breathe in for the count of 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold. And breathe out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And breathe in again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold. Breathe out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathe in again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold. And breathe out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And just taking a moment there. Okay. Just generally, what did everyone notice from doing that then? What did everyone notice from doing that type of exercise there? Good. Yeah. Good. I can see sort of everyone like the sort of different types of consensus that I'm sort of noticing here that actually that everyone's sort of noticing that it's starting to slow them down. It's taking them away from thinking. It's taking them away from that's what's going on in their minds at those times. It is. And that's the idea with this type of exercise, is to enable ourselves to sort of step back, to slow ourselves down. And by sort of slowing ourselves down, what I'm hoping that this will enable ourselves to do is that if that thought's still tricky, then it will enable ourselves to sort of challenge that tricky thought if we needed to do that. Or if it's not challenging or stepping back from that tricky thought, it'll enable ourselves to do the types of things that we may need to do to break that cycle for a bit. So that might be to allow ourselves to schedule the time for ourselves. Might be asking for that sense of help to sort of share that responsibility. it might be sort of doing types of the activities that we may have once loved with to do with the person that we're caring for, even though they may be a little bit more tricky. Okay, so we covered sort of during today's sort of session, we covered like a range of sort of different areas with this. We've covered sort of ways to sort of to manage how we're feeling in terms of making some small behavioural changes, but we also sort of looked at ways to sort of step back from the types of thoughts that we're experiencing at the time. And finally, what we've just looked at there is sort of ways of managing sort of physical tensions at times. Yeah. So have we got any sort of questions from what we talked about so far today? I'm just going to sort of I'll invite anyone to sort of ask any sort of questions in the sort of the question and answer sort of box or in the chat sort of section of the internet.
So we actually have a poll for that.
Okay.
We thought we'd ask you all what webinars you would like to see in the future. So I'll just launch that poll now. Okay, you should be able to see that, and you can have a vote on what you think you'd like to see going forward.
Okay. It's sort of a question that's come up. Are there anything you can do if the pressure is overwhelming and very strong anger or verging on anger? Okay, that's a sort of a good sort of question. So the technique that I mentioned that sort of there might sort of help to sort of slow ourselves down if we're sort of on the edge of sort of anger. The other types of things I might sort of recommend is just a lot of allowing yourself to sort of have a break for 2 or 3 moments. Okay, so if you're sort of noticing that we're on the sort of the verge of anger and we're feeling on the edge, actually just taking ourselves away just for a moment to allow ourselves just to sort of recover. So that might be just allowing ourselves to have a trip to the toilet. That might be allowing ourselves just to sort of go to the kitchen and make a brew. But just allowing ourselves just to escape that sort of situation for a moment, to give ourselves a bit of respite. And other sort of ways that some other people sort of notice that can be quite useful is just trying to sort of slow the day down. So what I mean by trying to slow the day down is that often what some carers do, what I've worked with, is trying to squeeze everything onto one day. So effectively, they're almost operating the day like at 70 miles an hour, and as a consequence for that, like the body is feeling really anxious, really on edge, and that can sort of almost make ourselves already on the verge or on the edge of anger anyway, because we're sort of operating at such a high level. So what I tend to sort of advise is just trying to sort of allow ourselves to identify what it is that we need to do in the day, and identify what sort of activities can sort of go. Actually, do we need to do the hoovering every day, or can we sort of put some of those activities off? Can we allow ourselves to sort of do sort of the bare minimum each day, and just allow ourselves to slow some of the things down?
So we've also
so Mark, on that point as well, would you say that going back, part of what you've just said there in terms of slowing down and maybe leaving some of the activities that you would ordinarily do, would you say when you went back to the previous slides where you said about handing over some of the responsibilities, so you've taken that pressure a little bit off?
Yeah. So that might be also sort of important to do too. So that might be getting actually sort of someone saying about getting that sort of additional sort of help too. That might be from social care service, or it might be a family member. But I guess what I'm also sort of suggesting with that, if that additional sort of support's coming in, then it might be sort of utilising that sort of time to do something for yourself. that would be which would allow that time to sort of cool down or do something for yourself at that time.
That's really cool. That's really good advice, Mark. And now we have the results of the poll. And I'll just share these results if you all can see them. By quite a landslide, mental health definitely is in the lead. But it seems that there's kind of a widespread demand for all of it, which is really interesting, but definitely something that we'll pay mind to going forward in making all these webinars. And we have a lot of stuff already covering all those areas that are scheduled in. So keep an eye out for all of that stuff.
And if anybody wants to elaborate on the areas that they have picked for additional support, more specifically, then feel free to let us know either in the chat here or send us an email directly to, I'll put the email address in the chat so you can send it to us there. It is contact@bridget.care.
I can see sort of a question that's coming from Darren, and the question is, any tips or exercises like to do as a family group, maybe the carer and the loved one they're looking after? So so this might be sort of linking back into sort of things that the family had once valued. What was important to the sort of the family unit at one point? Okay, so, and this is not one size fits all approach. This will be different to family. So say, for example, if it was as a family, it was to sort of, they would love walking or spending time with animals, for example. But for whatever reason, they don't have a dog anymore, don't have a cat anymore. Actually, what they could do as a family, where they could do things to sort of together, where maybe sort of meaningful for them all. Maybe sort of actually going to sort of a place where there's a like a local petting zoo where they're able to sort of engage with doing an activity together, allowing themselves actually to engage in the activity together, whether stroke the animal or they're being able to sort of take responsibility each time, even the person that's being cared for does some element of the task of what they're doing. And what was the other thing? I would also sort of suggest like coming together as a sort of a family unit and identifying a range of activities that they find particularly meaningful and everyone writing them down. Okay, and coming together as a sort of family to sort of identify, okay, well, what is it that we all like to do, and what types of things can we work towards doing together? Even the types of things that would have seemed to be quite difficult or tricky are still manageable. So say if a person wasn't able to, at the moment we're not able to do it, but saying if a person was a keen swimmer, or the family was keen swimmers, at one they might be able to have a word with the local sort of pools to find out actually how are they able to get back in the pool, how are they able to do these types of things together. As there might be sort of certain activities they might be able to do in a social distance way. So that might be if the sort of family is sort of separated quite far out on a long distance away from each other, they might be able to sort of to agree to sort of, and watching films together is something that's important. It might be they'll be able to sort of spend time on a group call using the Wi-Fi where they watch a film together and they all interact with one another on a social distance way by watching a film together from a distance away.
Yeah, and I really like that, Mark, because I think it's not just the unit that you have at home, because we're being locked away in lockdown, as it were. So you're staying with your family, and the pressure might be going up because for certain family members, you're in the same space effectively. I know we've had struggles in our household because we've got a daughter who's 12 going on 16. So there's all manner of different emotions going through her in terms of she can't understand why. Well, she can't understand why I'm being locked away, but there's things that like anxiety that presenting themselves, fear of catching the actual virus in itself. But at the same time, she's missing her friends. So she's found ways through technology, which she's coping with. Maybe us being slightly older, makes it a little bit more difficult because we're used to more interaction than using technologies. So it's engaging people in different ways, I think, is vital, but in a sharing kind of way. So Zoom parties, quizzes, all things like that where everyone can interact. So no, I think great advice there.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Like in the sort of the environment, it's not ideal, but actually it gets us that one step closer, isn't it, to what's important? And I think what the key thing is to sort of identify, actually, if you didn't do that, what would the alternative be? And the alternative would be actually we wouldn't be moving closer to what's important to ourselves. We would be spending time isolated. We would.
Yeah, I think it's interesting as well because on the other side of it, I've found that there are friends that I didn't normally communicate with, but through the fact that we're being locked at home, you are going through your phone and thinking, actually, I haven't spoken to that individual. So just taking that exercise of maybe going through your contacts and having a look at people you might have not have spoken to in a while could just reinvigorate and give you a different perspective as well.
Yeah, good. Thanks, Kat. Have you got any other questions or for me? So I can see sort of Emma's. Do you know the phone number to call for carer support? If I think that's coming up at the end. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So I'm going to cover that off now. So if we've got no more questions, I can cover that now.
Okay.
Yeah. So what we've actually got for everybody that's actually attended this session, we're giving everybody a free 30-minute appointment booking so they can actually speak to one of our care support service people. Natalie is one who will be running that, who runs that actual team. So you can actually click the link and it will take you across to the actual session. I'm going to put that within the chat as well, but we'll be emailing everybody with these details as well. So you don't need to necessarily jot it down now. Well, yeah, so what I'd like to do is thank Mark for his time and presenting and really, well, you've calmed me right down. I really needed this because it's highly stressful doing work and trying to manage your home and obviously your relationships there as well. And also we are going to do future webinars. So we are obviously going to put you on a newsletter mailing list so you can keep an eye on what's coming up next. Off the back of that poll, we will be letting you know which ones are moving forward we're going to be actually doing. So you may see Mark, you may see other individuals. You'll definitely see my face again. Whether or not I'll be looking like this is a different matter. Might be more clean shaven. And also this session has actually been recorded as well. So if anybody wants to review anything that's been said in the session, you can do. It will be on our website at bridget.care, but it'll also be going on YouTube as well. So I just put that link in. So can everybody see that link? Great. So thank you again, and we'll have to say goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.